There I was, only a few weeks ago, standing on a balcony in Jerusalem, quietly chatting with my husband. It was hot, but good hot. The kind of heat that reminds you you're not in North America. The kind of heat that's so hot that you want to cover your body rather than expose it. We stood there on that balcony in the middle of a family vacation, looking out at Jerusalem, just looking at the old city and beyond. We looked at that place where King David lived, that place where the sacred temple once stood. We stared at the site of the Western Wall where generations of Jews leave notes, desperate for communication with God. And we stood there having the most basic of conversations. What should we do that day? Should we go to the Shuk or the Israel Museum? Or maybe there were some sprinklers we could go to and let our children run around. And then we heard what I can only describe as two very loud booms in the distance. What was that? I looked at him, but I knew what it was. Whatever it was, it didn't sound good, he answered. We went inside. Refresh on my phone. Act calm for the kids. Run through scenarios in my mind. Is there a bomb shelter in this building? What do I need to take with me if I have to go there? Why am I even thinking these things? Everything's fine. Everything is fine. Of course it's fine. What if it's not fine? Of course it's fine. Refresh on my phone. There it is, in black and white in front of me. The headline read, "Rockets fired at Jerusalem. Islamic Jihad takes credit." I looked up at my husband. So we're in a war now, I guess? What was even happening? It's hard to compute actual violence when we generally live so peacefully without real threat of bodily harm. What even was this? A family vacation interrupted by Islamic Jihad firing rockets at us within earshot? I still don't really get it. It was scary. We didn't know what was going to happen. Would things escalate? Would Hamas join in the fighting? How would Israel respond? Would this violence aggravate tension between Arab and Jewish Israeli citizens? Would we have to run into a shelter with our children like our friends in Tel Aviv had to? Under the weight of that sun on that balcony in Jerusalem, I felt panic and anxiety and dread. We didn't know what would happen. In a few days' time, it became clear that we were safe. Thank God. We were under the Iron Dome, and the hostilities began to relax a bit. But if I'm being forthcoming, that feeling of anxiety and dread lingered with me after the events of that day for another reason. I started to feel a bit nervous because standing on that balcony, listening to rockets explode just a few miles away, I realized that this year needed to be the year that I really speak to you about Israel. Or more specifically, I want to speak with you about the way we speak about Israel and the impact of the way we speak about it. And that made me a little nervous. I think very seriously about how I choose to spend these precious few moments that you and I have together. And we know Israel can be a tough topic, divisive and complex and misunderstood and emotionally charged. So before I talk, I want to remind you of my approach to complicated, sometimes sensitive topics. One of the core elements in Judaism is the respectful exchange of ideas. Jews have been in conversation for centuries and agreeing and disagreeing with each other. The Jewish way is to add to the conversation, not to stifle it. Torah itself is full of ideas that seem in tension with each other. Any single page of Talmud will offer countless and conflicting opinions. Jews, of course, could not even decide which direction to hang a mezuzah, for goodness sake, so we hung it at a slant. So that's to say, You may agree with some of my ideas. You may disagree with others. That's okay. I don't believe agreement is always the goal. Judaism is about wrestling and listening and considering and contemplating and challenging ideas, sometimes even mainstream ones. So if you do disagree, I promise to respect you and your ideas, and I ask you to extend me the same courtesy. I promise I will listen to you and try and really hear. Maybe you will disagree with something I say, and maybe you'll agree with something I say. And I love that. It's Jewish. One thing many of us probably can agree on is that the way Israel is often discussed in public discourse has a negative valence. In the academic world, there are organized, professionalized boycotts. In the media world, there are think pieces in mainstream outlets we all read that go as far as questioning the very legitimacy of the Jewish state. And of course, we've seen elected officials, activists, and Twitter users alike throw around the ugliest of words about the Jewish state with relative ease. Words I don't want to say from the bima, but words you know, words you've heard a million times already. The public discussion in our country right now, in the circles that most of us travel in, ranges somewhere between tense and negative to shaming, vitriolic, hyperbolic, and even condemnatory. Maybe you think the way we talk about Israel is appropriate or deserved. Or maybe you think the way we talk about Israel is wildly anti-Semitic. Maybe you're somewhere in between. But for our purposes tonight, it doesn't really matter. Because what I'm interested in isn't the quality or lack thereof of our Israel discourse. It's the outcome of our Israel discourse, the impact of it. What is the end game of an Israel negative world view? Tonight I'm wondering, where does Israel vitriol ultimately release its venom? Are you familiar with what happened in the Sunrise Movement this year? The Sunrise Movement you may know about. It's a climate change organization for young people. Wonderful. They released a public statement withdrawing from a rally because organizations, quote, that are all in alignment with and in support of Zionism and the state of Israel. The organizations that were so terrible, so terrifying, so toxic that the Sunrise Movement refused to stand shoulder to shoulder with included the Jewish Council on Public Affairs, a pluralistic organization that's existed for over 70 years, the Religious Action Center, known as the RAC, where our teens and the teens of the Reform movement from all over the country go to participate in social justice work, and lastly, the National Council for Jewish Women, which has been leading the liberal Jewish charge on abortion access. The topic of the Sunrise Movement's refusal to participate was Israel, but the subject of the punishment was us. So let me ask you, does the Jew in Jerusalem feel the weight of the American online condemnation? Does the Jew in Beersheba really bear the brunt of the boycotts? Do the Jews of Tel Aviv and Tiberia really wonder about shawarma sales because of the public shaming of Israel here? I say no. The people who ultimately feel the wrath of our national discourse are not out there an ocean away. They're in here. They're you and me and the Jews of America. Israel hostility in America leads to hostility towards American Jews. How could it not? I want to be explicit. I do not believe that all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. Israel has a free press and an independent judiciary. It is a democracy. Criticism is part of that culture of freedom, and it's certainly part of Jewish culture as well. Just like here, criticism is often necessary, and it can even be patriotic. I certainly do not always agree with the government of Israel, which is kind of a silly thing to say because Israel seems to have a new government every day anyways. But nonetheless, if I lived there, there are policies I would vote against. the same way I do here. I do not believe any country is beyond reproach, so criticism is not my concern. But I am deeply concerned about Israel hostility and even hate, because there are a growing number of people and organizations who do not want to sit down and have a thoughtful conversation about policy. They don't want to map out possibilities about how to arrive at a two-state solution. They're not interested in coexistence or peace. They're not interested in us. They're people who hate Israel or who have been swept into hating Israel. And Israel hate leads to Jew hate. How could it not? Maybe you don't agree. Maybe you think that when we were talking about Israel, we were talking about Israelis and Israeli government and Israeli policies. Maybe that provides some reassuring distance to the problem. Or maybe you think this issue is far-flung and rare. Yeah, just some climate organization with a few quacks leading the charge. But don't be fooled. Excising Jews from public life is the prevalent and increasingly pervasive anti-Semitic practice of our day. It's not just climate change, and it's not just a one-off. Jews are increasingly excluded in social justice, in equity and inclusivity work, in business, in civil rights, and in academia. It happens in New York, it happens in California, it happens everywhere in between. It happened in Brooklyn this year. A Brooklyn-based marketing firm explained it would be too difficult to work with the Shalom Hartman Institute because of their Israel relationship. The Hartman Institute is a deeply liberal, pluralistic, Jewish institution which features a Muslim leadership initiative. They analyze Israel's place in the world with such painstaking seriousness and patience and self-reflection that I myself sometimes lose patience with it, to be honest. The Hartman Institute is a wonderful place. It represents the best of us. No matter, no marketing for you, the Hartman Institute was told. It's just a little too complicated. Zionism was the subject of the conversation, but Jews in America are the object. Zionist is the code word. Jew is the actual word. In 2017, Jews were expelled from the Dyke March in Chicago. Lofting a rainbow flag with a Jewish star on it, the marchers were told to leave because they, quote, made people feel unsafe. The organizers didn't want anything at the march that, quote, can inadvertently or advertently express Zionism. They didn't remove people from other backgrounds or other flags or symbols, just the Jews. Zionism is the entry point. Excluding Jews is the result. Even the Anti-Defamation League, for goodness sake, is not immune to this exclusion. In 2018, Starbucks reached out to the ADL to help lead an anti-bias training for its employees. Apparently, the ADL is now too controversial to work with. Despite their long history of support for civil rights and deep engagement fighting for equality for all, a cadre of Israel haters reached out to condemn their involvement. One wrote that the ADL was an anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian organization that peddles Islamophobia and attacks America's prominent Muslim organizations and activists and sponsors U.S. law enforcement agents to travel and get trained by the Israeli military. All debunked misnomers, but no matter. Because of public pressure, Starbucks removed the one and only Jewish organization from participating in the anti-bias training. Israel is the runway. American Jews are the destination. It's even in the religious world. This year, the leader of the Council of American Muslim Relations publicly warned against, quote, polite Zionists and Zionist synagogues. I guess that's me. I guess that's us. Israel is often the topic, But we American Jews are the target. I'm not suggesting that if this conversation had some impact on Israelis, it would be all right. I would, of course, condemn that as well. I am a proud Zionist, a lover of Israel, and I pray for the strength to support Israel even when it seems hard to do so. But this Israel conversation is not about Israel. It's about you and me. It's about Jews existing in America. Shaming Israel is the portal to silencing and separating Jews. It's the way in, the entry point. Do you think I'm overstating? I wish I was. But before you decide, think about college campuses. At Tufts University, there was a student-led effort to compel other students from participating in anything that appeared to, quote, normalize or benefit Israel. The campaign demanded that students withdraw from birthright trips, from J Street participation, and to withdraw from a class entitled Visions of Peace that focuses on dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians. The university condemned this effort. At the University of Vermont, rocks were thrown at a campus Hillel, and a group for survivors of sexual assault allegedly denied membership to pro-Israel students. The United States Department of Education has opened an investigation into this behavior, which the university denies. At Rutgers University, the Jewish fraternity regularly has eggs thrown at it, including this past Rosh Hashanah. At CUNY, a professor withheld a recommendation from a student until the student clarified their Israel position. At Berkeley, certain student groups have created what was reported as a Jew-free zone, banning speakers who support Zionism in a campus that is intended to celebrate diversity. These rules, broadly and obviously panned as anti-Semitic, ensured that the dean of the law school himself, a liberal Zionist, could not speak there. And at Harvard, students installed an art piece about Israel in the middle of campus, including images alluding to long debunked lies about Jews spreading disease, killing children, and being bloodthirsty during what they called annual Apartheid Week. Imagine being a 19-year-old Jewish person on campus. How would that make you feel? Anti-Israel are the words. Anti-Jewish is the effect. Israel is the topic. Our children are the target. Are we going to allow this to be the great social justice movement of our day? It has all the hallmarks of a successful campaign: governmental leadership that supports it, policy goals, high levels of funding, impassioned supporters, professional leadership. It is an organized and focused movement, which results in the reduction of Jews in public life. The way we talk about Israel is the way we talk about Jews. And it does feel a little bit dangerous to say that, actually. Even here in this room, amongst friends, it feels countercultural for some reason. But I'm thinking that standing on that balcony, listening to rockets intended to kill me and other civilians, that it also feels dangerous not to say it. Israel hostility is Jew hostility. If I can't say it, how can I ask you to? If I can't call out what's really going on with this backwards, hypercritical, hyperbolic, hysterical Israel conversation, how can I ask you to? If I can't say that the American-Israel conversation results in rampant anti-Semitism, how can we ask our kids to say it? Because it's not some other Jew's problem out there. It's ours in here. It's not about those Jews that don't look like us or live like us or think like us or sound like us. It is us. Are we willing to accept this elimination of Jewish existence in civic life? Should we be stuffed back into the narrows of Egypt? I say no. I don't see this topic as political at all. It's not about being a Republican or a Democrat, or about being on any certain spot on the spectrum of being a Democrat. It's about treating human beings equally and with dignity. It's about demanding justice for all, including Jewish Americans. Because the consequences of going quietly into the night, of allowing this continued exclusion of Jews from public life, are dire for the diaspora. It means that good people who want to celebrate inclusivity, eliminate climate change, do their jobs, make the world a better place, or simply learn in a school won't be able to do so. It means the minimization of Jews in public life. It means that America is experimenting with its darkest tendencies. It means that the future of American Jewry is more fragile than it's ever been. It means that anti-Semitism is winning, and it cannot mean that. Every year we hear the sound of the shofar. I like to explain the shofar to children as God's alarm clock, calling us out, telling us to wake up and shake off the dust, to open our eyes and stop imbibing what we are told, and instead analyze deeply who we are. This year, the shofar blast calls us to call out Israel hate and hysteria for what it is, little more than a gateway to anti-Semitism, and often anti-Semitic itself. I know. It's hard for us to stand up against this conversation for lots of very real reasons. It's intimidating, it's scary, it's risky. You could be castigated and called out, condemned, or canceled. Going against the grain is not without cost. In any ways, it is a really confusing conversation. But nonetheless, we have to say it. We need to say it over and over again. And I believe in us. I believe we can say it. I believe this is a conversation we are capable of having. The way we talk about Israel is not as scary as having Islamic Jihad launch hundreds or thousands of rockets a handful of miles away. But the Israel conversation in America is its own type of violence. And I'm not sure there's an iron dome for this one. So what should we do? 3 options. Option 1, we can leave. We can leave these institutions and these organizations and start our own climate change advocacy groups, our own institutions to celebrate the LGBTQ plus community, our own universities. That's what the rabbis of post-destruction Israel did. They had no choice. They lost all of their institutions and they changed the future of the Jewish people, and oh my goodness, did that work. Their innovation is why you and I are sitting here today under the umbrella of this thing we still call Judaism. The mystics of Svat did the same thing. They lost their geographic and cultural framework and they turned inward. They invented things and they wrote things. They created what mysticism is today. They inspired Kabbalat Shabbat, which you and I do every week. They abandoned all they knew and they changed the trajectory of Judaism for the better. Maybe we should too. Maybe we should say, we are done. We are abandoning these organizations and structures that don't want us, and we will make our own centers of justice and education and business. And then there's option 2. We can stay, and we can try and change this trajectory from within. Davka, we can send our children to these colleges and help them represent as Jews. We can speak up and speak out. We can counter-protest and counter-program. We can fundraise and coalition build and organize. We can remind people that just as we have every obligation to fight for the dignity and justice for others, we also have every right to be a part of that work. We can stay and muster the chutzpah to shame the shaming of Israel. There are many Jewish institutions and groups and friend circles right now that are doing this exact work of reevaluating their existence seriously and somewhat frantically. They're trying to find ways to stay and to make things better. And finally, option 3. Option 3 is to do nothing. We like to say there are no wrong answers, but in this case, there is one wrong answer. Because doing nothing is the outcome we absolutely cannot tolerate. We cannot pretend this problem is on the periphery when it's pervasive and appalling. Ignoring it is enabling it. Denying it is helping it flourish. It is not for us to complete the work, but neither are we free to desist from it. Do not desist. We can't. There is broken glass all over this world, and we must pick up those pieces and repair them. The very future of the diaspora may depend on which option we choose. Option 3, doing nothing at all, is no option. I beg you not to choose that path. Be a part of building a better Jewish future. I want to conclude with good news. We here, in this very room, have all the resources to really work on this problem. If you wonder what they are, just look around. We have some of the best minds, the kindest people, the warmest souls in here right now. You're sitting in a room of people that have your back, of people who support you in good times and bad, of people who at your worst help to raise you up and at your best celebrate you. Together, we can be a part of and even lead the way in ensuring that we quiet the growing acceptance of Jew hate. The book of Chronicle teaches this. Ata einei yehiyu petuchot v'oznei kashuvot l'tfilat hamakom hazeh. Now my eyes will be open, and my ears attentive to the prayers of this place. May our eyes be open, and our ears be attentive. This new year, I pray that Israelis of all backgrounds can stand on their balconies without fear. And I also pray for us. May God grant us the strength to hold firm against hate, to open our eyes to what is happening and to stand against it. May we have the strength to see what is before us. May we have the courage to call it out. And may God sustain the Jewish people for now and all time. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be God's will. Shana Tova.